All right, so this is going to be my initial reaction to the Dateline NBC special on Bryan Kohberger, aired last night, called The Terrible Night on King Road. And again, these are initial reactions. What I did is, while I was watching the video or the documentary, it was a 2-hour documentary on Dateline with my wife, I paused the video several times to make notes on my phone, which I have now got in front of me. And I'm just going to kind of go through those notes point by point during that video and give you my initial reaction. I might do something more polished later. I don't know. It kind of is what it is. So this may be the only thing, and it may be a little lengthy. I'm going to go on some rants. But let me start out by saying this about my initial reaction. My initial reaction is this. I knew this was going to be a hit piece. Everybody knew this was going to be a hit piece, I think. And having said that, there was some new information, and there was some shockingly new information. There was some new information that made it look even worse for Bryan Kohberger, as if it wasn't bad enough. The one thing that really stands out to me over and over again is probably one of the worst things, in my opinion, for Bryan Kohberger, is the looking for a K-bar knife after the fact kind of thing, which looks really sketchy. That's probably one of the, that to me stands out as worse than the whole DNA at the scene thing, which is, again, a speck of DNA. But let's put that aside for a moment, because it's going to come up in the episode. I'm going to talk about it. There were some shockers. Footage that had never been seen before, and that footage wasn't shocking other than it's amazing how much more crystal clear that video is than the videos that we've been working with for 2.5 years. One of the most shocking things I will tell you right off the bat to me, and let me state this. When I watched it, I thought to myself, okay, what are you going to do when you get on and do a video about this? You're going to tell people, hey, this was a hit piece like I expected. And then you're going to make the argument why Bryan Kohberger still may be innocent. And then I asked myself, am I just trying too hard to, uphold the presumption of innocence until proven guilty in the court of law? And I don't think I am. And let me be fair with why. So in other words, I did question myself. I'm like, okay, this makes it look even worse for Bryan Kohberger. Maybe it's time to, there's a moment where you kind of like, maybe it's time to give up on the whole presumption of innocence thing. It's really looking bad for Bryan Kohberger. Let me point out two things. One of the things that I had the most problem with in this show was probably 5 times, maybe 4 or 5 times, NBC made the statement, exclusive information provided to us by the FBI. We've been given exclusive information provided to us by the FBI. This bothers me tremendously. Why is the federal government providing exclusive inside information in a public trial to the media so that the media can come forward and tell people how to think about a case before it begins, with exclusive insider information from the government itself to mainstream media? And this fundamentally is the reason why I will maintain. I believe that you need a mouthpiece, not you and not me. I'm being rhetorical here. We need mouthpieces in America who are willing to stand up for the presumption of innocence until proven guilty, because the frickin' federal government is not. The federal government is going to mainstream media and giving exclusive inside information to mainstream media so that Dateline can do a special right before a man's trial fighting for his life on a death penalty case, and then tell you insider information about why you should feel he's guilty before he stepped into the court on his first day in court. That is disgusting to me. It's disgusting. And I will maintain, it's okay. If Dateline's reporters want to go on and say, here's why we think Bryan Kohberger is guilty, fine. It's a little bit disturbing because of the audience that they have, but they have the right, just like I have the right, to tell you why I think he might not have been the one who did it. It's their right and my right. Where it becomes a problem for me is when we repeatedly have the prosecution and law enforcement going to mainstream media, giving them inside tips and information that nobody else has seen in the public, and then going forward with that insider information from law enforcement and the prosecution to the public to preload people on how they should feel about the case before the case begins. One more time, this is disgusting to me. And this is the reason why I even more dig into, I don't care how bad it looks for Bryan Kohberger, that is unacceptable. For you to be feeding the media the narrative with never seen before footage and details to make it look even worse for a guy who hasn't had his first day in court. That's unacceptable. So that's why a moment I was like, man, that looks bad for Bryan, but why, am I going to keep defending the presumption of innocence? Yes, I'm going to keep, especially because this kind of bullshit is going on. So let's get into my initial reactions. First note I have, the episode made it clear that their opinion is that Maddie Mogen was the target. Everybody else was collateral damage. I still will tell you, my gut tells me that's horseshit. Maddie Mogen was not the target of that house, but that's their thing. And the reason why they're saying it, in my opinion, is they're basing it on a loose idea that Bryan Kohberger was stalking Maddie Mogen on Instagram. Again, this is a statement that the Gonzalez family came forward to. Even though in recent court documents it has been admitted by the prosecution that there is no link to Bryan Kohberger in any of the victims, which to me would include if he was stalking one of the victims on Instagram. They didn't seem to indicate there was that link, that there was no link between the defendant and the victims that they found. And all through this episode of Dateline, they repeatedly talked about certain pictures that were on Bryan Kohberger's phone, including pictures of WSU female students and Idaho female students, which were not the victims. They just seemed to kind of glance over that. They repeatedly told you about all the females that are on his phone, but not the victims. There's no link to the victims. And yet they will paint in this episode that Bryan Kohberger was obsessed with Maddie and couldn't have her, and that's why he killed her. It's disgusting in that regard. Their narrative sucks ass. There's my initial take. Their narrative that Bryan Kohberger was rebuffed by a female that he wanted and couldn't have, and therefore went to kill her, is asinine. Asinine. There is way better motives. And even if it was the Ted Bundy motive, which was another motive that they tried to do, that he was just obsessed with serial killers, that is way better. That is a way better motive than he was obsessed with Maddie and Maddie was his target. I'm just going to say it again. It's horseshit. I don't believe that for a second, and that's my personal opinion. All right. And again, they made it, why? Why was Maddie Mogen targeted? And they said because she was beautiful. You know what? Frankly, in my opinion, all of those girls were beautiful to some extent. So acting like Bryan was obsessed with Maddie because she was beautiful almost made it sound like you don't think the other girls were beautiful, which I thought was a little disturbing. Like all those girls were pretty girls. So why would he target Maddie? Because she was beautiful. The other girls were very attractive females. All the females on Bryan Kohberger's phone were attractive females, but they try to make it sound like somehow Maddie was some exceptional beauty. And personally, I think one of the victims was far prettier than the rest, but I'm not going to tell you which one I think it is. One of the women in that house, I think, was by far better looking than all the rest of them. But that's a personal opinion. Everybody's got a personal opinion. But maybe they think Bryan Kohberger thought that Maddie was the most attractive woman there. Whatever the case may be, it's loose. They also painted the girls as being. Again, this is the hero worship part of all stories like this. That these girls were the top of their class, very respectful, very responsible girls. Contrast this with the fact that they were on a Greek row area, essentially, of the campus, and they were all huge party girls. They were hammered off their ass at the bar with massive amounts of intoxication. They had all kinds of parties with massive alcohol and noise complaints and all these different things, partying it up left and right. But what they want to paint is hero worship, which is, and victim worship, which is that they were bright top of the class females and would have graduated at the top of their class and extremely responsible women. Maybe they were, maybe they weren't. But it was trying to gloss over the fact that this was a party house. These were party girls. They were hammered off their ass. That was a drunken party. And again, trying to do the whole, hey, they're just very responsible people, and they would have never let Bryan Kohberger in the house, because there was a question asked at one point. Do you think Bryan Kohberger had been to that house before partying? Absolutely not. The girls would have kicked him out. An older man like that, they would have never let an older man. All of that is speculation bullshit to make them look like they were such responsible young girls, and never would have had an older man at a party, and never would have had the likes of Bryan Kohberger, because they were responsible females and top of their class. And it was over the top a little bit with the whole, again, it's the victim worship, which we tend to do. The victims become idolized. They were great, fantastic human beings that had, nothing wrong, and it was innocent lives taken. And I'm not saying innocent lives weren't taken. I'm just saying this is what we do to paint a narrative. That we're going to paint Bryan Kohberger as a psycho killer with social problems, and the girls, by contrast, as super popular, super respectful, super intelligent, had everything going for him, and Bryan Kohberger just hated the fact that they were everything he couldn't be. That's the narrative we have to paint, so that's what we're going to do. Howard Bloom is featured all throughout the episode, and I find it extremely disturbing, in my opinion, the way they handled Howard Bloom. I'm going to get ahead of myself about one thing. They had, I think it's Ashlyn Couch. She was one of the original signatures on the lease for the house. We're reading, if you're not aware, we are reading in my Devil's Advocates platform, Howard Bloom's book, When the Night Comes Falling, which they mention in the episode. They also mentioned Howard Bloom is a consultant to Dateline. So he's heavily featured. He's written a book. We're reading that book. I've been pointing out to you, if you've been watching chapter by chapter of my review of When the Night Comes Falling, how biased Howard Bloom is to painting a narrative that Bryan Kohberger is a psycho killer, and how he paints that narrative with a very, very biased brush. So I find it extremely bizarre, and I'm going to tell you something you probably won't agree with. Ashlyn Couch, I think it was Ashlyn, was one of the signatures on that lease original for the 1122 King residence. They referred to her multiple times as Kaylee's best friend, which is ironic. No, not ironic. That's not the word. Weird, because over and over again, all I have read for 2.5 years is that Maddie was Kaylee's best friend. But now all of a sudden, Ashlyn is Kaylee's best friend. Okay, so that was a little odd in the first place. Secondly, Howard, and I'm not going to retake this and reread it. You can correct me if you're wrong, and I will make a video if I'm wrong, explaining that I'm wrong, and I'll go back if you correct me. But I'm going to go off of my memory, and if my memory's wrong, let me know. Howard Bloom indicated that while Ashlyn Couch, AC, while she signed the lease, she wasn't there very long. She quickly got a better offer from other people on campus that she wanted to stay with because they were sorority sisters or whatever, and she got a different offer, and she didn't stay at that house. She wasn't there. That room downstairs that they're trying to indicate was where she was living. She wasn't living there. She had found a better offer and went somewhere else, which again is kind of contrary to she's Kaylee's best friend, but she wasn't living there. And again, they gloss over this in the episode. And in fact, and here's my personal opinion, you can tell me to blow it out my ass if you want. They had, again, I hope it's Ashlyn. I keep saying Ashlyn Couch. I think I'd say it, but maybe I'm wrong. They had her mother on there. And this is my opinion about how these episodes work. I don't believe that Mrs. Couch was staying in that house, but they wanted to paint the narrative from the mother's perspective, how her daughter was supposed to be in that house that night. And the only reason she wasn't in the house is because the family had to have their dogs watched and asked Ashlyn to watch the dogs. Otherwise, she would have been in the house that night and could have been murdered. And that whole thing is designed to be really, really emotional and sensational. So you can have the mother go, oh my God, my daughter just barely missed being a murder victim herself because she was supposed to be there that night. I cry bullshit, in my opinion. She wasn't living there. Howard Bloom talked about she wasn't living there. She had taken a different offer. She was living somewhere else, but they make it look in the episode as if that girl lived there that night and just happened to not be there because she was supposed to be there, but the family wanted her to watch it. And then they had the mother come on and in tears, my daughter almost got lost that night because she was supposed to be there. Makes great TV. Makes fantastic TV. But I don't believe that is the story at all. I cry bullshit. She wasn't living at that house. That room downstairs was empty from what I've been told. She wasn't living there. She was living somewhere else. And I highly doubt that she was supposed to be there that night. But it made great television because then you have a mother having about how close of a call it was that her daughter wasn't killed. Never mind, of course, that Dylan Mortensen came face to face with the killer and survived. Bethany was downstairs. She survived. So even if her daughter was there, what makes you think that she would have been killed? It just made nice, sensational TV to have the mother bawling about how my daughter could have been lost that night because she was supposed to be there. I don't believe she was supposed to be there, but great for NBC that you spun it that way. That's my opinion. Tell me to blow it out my ass if you want. That's fine. So then they pointed to the fact that Bryan Kohberger had tons of photos of pretty girls in bikinis on his phone. He was searching for girls and he had photos of girls in bikinis. And I thought to myself, this is the dumbest thing I've ever seen. Tons of males, I'm sorry, tons of males have pictures of girls in bikinis or no clothes for that matter on their phone or interested in girls like that. And Bryan Kohberger's got photos of girls from WSU and Idaho, Moscow, Idaho on his phone, pretty girls and pictures and bikinis and stuff like that. They are painting it in the episode as proof of a stalker. This was the narrative. He's obsessed with pretty girls. He's obsessed with pretty girls that he can't have. This was the narrative they painted over and over again. And let me point out to you how freaking asinine stupid the point is. Multiple times they have pointed out in Howard Bloom's book and even in the episode that Bryan Kohberger had no problems with girls at all. And yet they simultaneously will point out how Bryan Kohberger had problems with girls. Let me point out to you just what's in the episode alone. Bryan Kohberger, it was at a party. There was a guy, very attractive male in my opinion, and that's just an opinion, attractive male who wanted to hit on a woman and get her phone number. And he watched Bryan Kohberger go up and beat him to it and get the girl's phone number. And he said to himself, wow, this guy isn't awkward at all. He's getting girls' phone numbers and he just scooped me on getting this girl's phone number. Bryan Kohberger had no problem. Now, I don't think Bryan Kohberger personally is a good-looking male. I don't think he's half as good-looking as this other guy. And again, I'm just giving opinions. But I agree that Bryan Kohberger isn't a stunner. But yet he didn't have problems getting girls' phone numbers. In fact, a girl that interviewed in the episode talks about how she gave him his phone number, and it was just fate. It was just luck that she decided not to return his text because she had told him that she's into hiking. She had clearly indicated that she was inviting him to go hiking with her. And then Bryan Kohberger got her phone number because he has no problem getting her phone number, and then texted her and said, hey, I was the guy you were talking to about hiking. Pretty sure I'm the guy you were talking to about hiking. And I'd really like to, to see these hikes or go on a hike sometime if you'd like to. And they painted it as how odd that was. It was really awkward that he reached out about that, and it was very formal. There was nothing formal about it. In my opinion, that was just a text from a guy. And if he's a little socially awkward with women, so have I been. I'm not a killer. So the whole thing was asinine. And it's funny because the indication from the female was that it wasn't that she was turned off by Kohberger. It wasn't that she thought he was a creep. It wasn't that they thought there was anything wrong with him. All she said was, thank God I decided not to respond to that, and I don't know why. Wait a minute. Isn't why because he's a creep and you think he's a psycho killer? No, that's not what she said. She didn't know why she didn't respond to it. She just didn't. And it's a good thing she didn't because it turns out that he's a killer. Okay? So let me make sure you understand what I'm saying. She found Bryan Kohberger engaging enough and not awkward enough to give him her phone number. And she's not sure why she didn't respond to him about going hiking, because it wasn't that she thought he was creepy. It's only because in retrospect that she's like, wow, I'm glad I didn't respond to him. But you'll follow what I'm saying? And this is the case with many things. Girls, he got multiple girls' phone numbers that first day. He did not have problem with girls at the party. They did not view him as creepy. There was a moment, let me get back to the moment about the married woman. One more thing. There was more detail about Bryan Kohberger had a female who worked with him in his office on campus as a TA in the office. And I think her last name was Ko. She was an Asian girl. And they mentioned that she had feelings for Bryan Kohberger. She was attracted to Bryan Kohberger. Oh, wait a minute. I thought Bryan Kohberger can't get women. And in fact, they said that Bryan Kohberger didn't necessarily feel the same way about her, that he maybe felt he was too good for her. Oh, wait a minute. I thought Bryan Kohberger can't get women. How does Bryan Kohberger get the opinion that he's better than some woman if he can't get women? You can't have it both ways. You can't continually tell us how bad he is with women while he's getting girls' phone numbers. He's got a girl who likes him and wants to be with him, has feelings for him, but he thinks he's too good for her, perhaps, because again, you're just painting the narrative of anything you can to make him look bad, and then tell us over and over again how bad he is with girls and he can't have girls. And because he can't have girls, he's going to kill them because Bryan wants these attractive women and he can't have them. Apparently, he can have phone numbers of attractive females. He can have an attractive female that he works with in the campus who wants a relationship with him. By the way, who stayed the night with him. That was another thing. They talk about, oh God, this is going to be much longer than I expected. So they talk about the fact that this woman had a break-in at her apartment, which they are trying to paint as Bryan Kohberger is probably the one who broke in. But we don't know that. But we're going to sure the fuck speculate about it all day long. That's what they do this entire, so many times. We don't know if Bryan was doing this. And then I want to say, but you'll sure the fuck speculate about it all day long because it makes him look bad. We don't know that he did this, but we're sure going to speculate about it all day long to make him look bad. So there was a break-in at this girl who has feelings for Bryan Kohberger at her place. You know what she did? Feeling uncomfortable, she went and stayed the night in Bryan Kohberger's apartment. Stayed the night with him. Now they indicate nothing was going on. There was no romantic engagement and no sexual activity. You don't know that. You just want to, again, they want to point out that Bryan Kohberger has a problem with women and can't relate to women, but yet a female runs to him for protection when her house is broken into and stays the night at his house. And they literally made it look like that was a no, never mind. It's completely contrary to your narrative. In addition to that, when the woman later, that same woman who supposedly believes that Bryan Kohberger was the one that broke into her apartment, has Bryan Kohberger come over and install the security cameras in her apartment to try to watch for the burglar next time if he breaks in. So she thinks he's so creepy and could have been the person who broke into her house, but she's going to have Bryan Kohberger put the security cameras in her house. Which one is it, people? You mother... I'm going to lose my mind. Which one is it? Does she think he's the burglar, or is she staying the night at his place for protection and then having him install her security cameras? Now, they make an interesting point. At some point, they said she had a room key for her apartment that she kept in an office drawer in the office where Bryan Kohberger shared an office with her at the campus, and that the key was missing one day. And that she asked Bryan Kohberger about it, and he said he didn't know anything about it. And then later on, a few hours later or something like that, the key magically appears again in the drawer. Now, to play devil's advocates, I have looked for things a million times that I looked right at it 12 times and didn't see it. And then all of a sudden I see it, and I'm like, what the fuck? Like, I just looked for that. So that could have happened. But what they want to paint is Bryan Kohberger stole her key to make a copy of her key so he could break into her apartment. And then when she questioned him about where her key was, he quickly replaced it. And that's the story. But it's all speculation. And it did look bad. It does look bad. But again, let's not forget that this woman went to Bryan Kohberger for protection and stayed the night in his apartment the night that the burglary happened, and then had him come over and install security cameras in her apartment. And yet they want to paint it as she suspects that he's the guy that actually broke into her apartment. I can't tell you how disgusted I am with the way they do this. He's bad with women, but he gets all their phone numbers. He's bad with women and can't have them, but he's got a woman who has feelings for him that he thinks he's too good for her. He broke into a woman's apartment and she suspected him, but she stayed the night at his place for protection and asked him to install security cameras. Am I the only one who sees the stupidity of this whole back and forth logic? All right. Let's go back to that married woman. I got a note about it. So they're at the same party, the pool party, there was apparently a married woman that Bryan Kohberger seemed to be attracted to and was trying to talk to. She supposedly, and this is all speculation, she wasn't on the show. She was not interviewed. They just said that this is on good authority that this happened at the party. So the married woman apparently gave glances to her husband at the party that she was uncomfortable with this man approaching her. And so her husband came over. What he did is unclear. They don't say the husband told him, hey, back the fuck off, she's a married woman. Nothing like that. There's no indication that the husband actually told Bryan Kohberger she's married. She gave her husband a look of awkwardness, like, hey, this guy is kind of flirting with me, can you come over and rescue me? So the husband comes over, mingles with the area, but Bryan Kohberger didn't get the hint. He continued to pursue the girls and get near the girls at the pool, even though the husband had approached him. Again, there's no indication that the husband said, hey, I'm married to this woman, quit flirting with my wife. Nothing like that. It just said the husband came over, but Bryan Kohberger didn't get the hint. I'm telling you, there's a million ways to view that. It may not have been obvious at all to Bryan Kohberger that she was a married woman and that was her husband. That may not have been at all, but they're going to make it spin that way. Everything in this episode was spun to make Bryan Kohberger look the worst that they possibly can. Including, for example, and I may be getting ahead of this because I'm looking through my notes and I don't see where I wrote it down. And I feel like it's going to be in there, but I guess I'm going to do it ahead of time. They talked about early on how people thought it was awkward because there's a place that people go hiking, and at night people were coming down from the hill because it's getting dark. But there's Bryan Kohberger, and he's going up the hill. Fucking Keith Morrison in his voice, but Bryan Kohberger was going up the hill. Dun dun dun! Oh my God, he's going up. He must be a psycho killer. He's going, and so they repeated over and over again how Bryan Kohberger, get this, is a night owl and likes to do things at night. So he goes up on the top of the hill, stargazing, like exactly they said he was doing. The defense is saying he was doing on the night of the murders, stargazing. He's going to the top of the hill to go look at stars at night. And here's how they painted it. People like him want to remain in the shadows. They operate in darkness. They want to be in the darkness. They don't want to be seen. I'm so sick. I'm so sick of that bullshit. People, that is circumstantial, presidential bullshit. I like to be alone. I was a single child. I didn't have brothers and sisters. I had a sister, but she died of SIDS at a very young age. So in case anybody wants to call me a liar, you had a sister. Yeah, I had a sister when I was a child, and I didn't really know her that well. I don't remember anything about her. But the point being is I grew up a single child. I like to be alone. I also like people, but I like to be alone. I like to go for drives by myself. I like to go for walks by myself. I like to be out at night by myself. I'm not an effing psycho killer. And saying Bryan Kohberger because he wants to go for a hike. My wife even said, first thing she said is like, you go for hikes by yourself all the time and at night. Yeah, I do. But apparently you're a psycho killer wanting to operate from shadows and be in the dark. It's circumstantial, negative bullshit that when you paint it like, but here's the thing, Bryan Kohberger was going up the hill. It makes it sound creepy, and that's exactly what they want it to sound. There's nothing creepy about Bryan Kohberger walking up a hill at night to go look at the stars by himself if he's kind of a little bit of a loner and likes to be alone. But they're going to sure make it sound, and then they bring in a profiler. Criminal profiler. This is how these men operate. They want to be in darkness. They want to operate from the shadows. It's disgusting to me. And they also said that, because he likes darkness, that means he's evil. That's the impression that they do. So they talk about how Bryan is detached from society, wants to be alone. That means he's detached from society. Again, he wants to be alone. God damn it. He wants to be alone and he wants to be attached from society. So that's why he's going to a big, huge pool party and hitting on girls at the party, because he wants to be alone and he's detached from society. Oh, he's horrible with women and he can't have any of them. That's why he got multiple girls' phone numbers. I don't know what to tell you about this. If you don't see it, you're never going to see it. You're never going to see it. So anyways, again, multiple times, I got a note in here, multiple times Dateline admits that they got preferential treatment from the FBI and that they got insider information never seen before by the FBI, cell phone data given to us exclusively by the FBI, never seen before. Why is the FBI giving mainstream media Hitpiece information so they can go on and prejudice people before his trial starts? His trial's about to start now. We're really close to the trial now. And the FBI is giving exclusive information to mainstream media, Dateline, so that Keith Morrison can say, but here's the problem. Bryan Kohberger might be a killer. All right. So they mentioned that Bryan Kohberger was searching for a paper on Ted Bundy. And they make it sound super creepy. Guess what? He's searching for a paper written by a professor at his university, at WSU, I believe. He also had a famous professor at DeSales, where he came from. Man, my nose itches like a son of a bitch. Anyways, so the fact that he looked up a paper on Ted, and they bring up Ted Bundy over and over again, because Bryan Kohberger looked up serial killers, including Ted Bundy, multiple times, and the son of Sam, and whatever. And they use that to say that he is creepy obsessed with serial killers. Now, they will also say in the same episode, remember, Bryan Kohberger is into criminology. So was it research for his papers? We don't know. But we're sure the hell going to speculate it. That's because he's obsessed with serial killers. So, again, as my wife said, I've looked into Ted Bundy multiple times. I've been obsessed with the story about Ted Bundy multiple times. This guy's a criminology student. He's going to be interested in serial killers because he's a criminology student. But again, the entire purpose of that episode was to point out anything that looks creepy. He's got photos of females because he likes the female form. He likes to go up on hills at night because he wants to operate in darkness. He looks up serial killers, not because he's in criminology, a student, and that's what his obsession is learning about the criminal mind, but because he likes killers. Maybe, to be fair, maybe it's true. But it's prejudicial bullshit to do it in the way that they do. And they said, again, after talking about the Ted Bundy, they literally said that they admit that he may have been doing research for his schoolwork. But the profiler thinks it's something else. The profiler they bring in, this is how these kind of men operate. They look into other killers to see how other killers, this is how they operate. So, Keith Morrison, he may have been just doing research, cut to the profiler, but this is how killers operate. They look at other killers and they find out how to do it. Okay. We talked about the girlfriend. Na Young Ko was her name. I got it written in here. I don't know how to spell it. Na Young Ko. She wanted a relationship. It said the photos of Instagram, they talk about Instagram, which I found is funny because, again, they talk about how Bryan Kohberger had Instagram and how he was downloading photos of girls. They never said he downloaded photos of Maddie or Kaylee. Yet the family, the Gonzalez family, indicated that they had found Bryan Kohberger was liking, thumbs upping, whatever, liking and interacting with photos of Maddie. What they did say, and this is, I thought, again, look at you clever mother stickers with the way that you do this. Bryan Kohberger was looking at and saving photos from several females who knew Maddie Mogen. Okay? So you're on college campuses. You've got a bunch of young 20-year-old female girls that all kind of look pretty and hang out in the same social circles. And he downloaded some photos of some females that knew Maddie Mogen. Literally, that's how they said it. He downloaded photos of girls that knew Maddie Mogen. Okay, but your premise at the beginning of the show is Bryan Kohberger is obsessed with Maddie and came in to attack Maddie. And by the way, they want to make it clear that it was a sexually motivated crime. He intended to rape her. That's what they made it sound like. This was sexually motivated, a sexual fantasy. He was fantasizing about women and downloading women that he couldn't have and sexually fantasizing about them. And yet, now you got to tell me, if you think those 4 murders on 2 floors of the house happened in about 8 to 10 minutes, and now you factor in he raped a girl too, or 2, because it was a sexual fantasy, remember, he's in there to rape. So did he rape Maddie? No indication. No indication whatsoever is that any of the women were raped. No indication is that Maddie was raped. Now, there is an expert, I've talked about it before, that came in who is an expert about crimes against women, in particular, that have sexual assault. That's the only indicator I've seen where the defense brought in an expert that had to deal with crimes against women, specifically sexual crimes. But there has been no released information to this day that any of the women were raped. And if there was a rape, How did his DNA not get in that woman? How did the DNA not get more on the crime scene of Bryan Kohberger? How does he do a rape if that's the case? And furthermore, how now do you honestly people think that he can go in there and kill 4 people on 2 floors in about 10 minutes and have time to rape a woman as well? And by the way, carve up Ethan Chapman. That's another new shocker that came up. We'll get to that in a little bit. So I don't believe it was a rape, but they're going to constantly tell you it's a sexual fantasy. He wanted Maddie. He couldn't have her. He wanted to rape her. He went in there to rape her, and then things went sideways. That's their theory on this show. It's asinine. It's asinine to me. But if you want to go with it, okay. You probably tuned this off a lot. If you go with that theory, you've tuned me out a long time ago, and you're not watching this anymore anyways. All right. So talking about the girlfriend, the girl that liked him, that she stayed at his apartment and had him install security cameras. Multiple times they talk about the sexual fantasy that Bryan Kohberger must have in his mind, and that's why he's downloading pictures of females, because he's got sexual fantasies. Woe, by the way, to all teenage boys, because if you've ever downloaded females' photos to your phone, you're probably having sexual fantasies about women you could never have, and you're probably going to be a killer someday. That's the logic. If you're a male and you like females and you like the female form and you download pretty girls, you're probably obsessed about women you could never have, and you're going to be a killer. Come on, people. Come on. Do better. All right. They suggested that Kohberger was looking at TikTok to see the layout of the house with no evidence whatsoever. Bryan Kohberger was probably using TikTok, and he'd be watching these girls and seeing what the layout of the house is, seeing how many people are there at what times of day. Oh, look, there's a door. That's what they were doing. Oh, look, there's a door behind them in this video. Nowhere did they indicate that Bryan Kohberger actually did watch the TikTok feeds of any of the girls. And I repeat, the prosecution has told us there is no evidence linking Bryan Kohberger to any of the victims. If Bryan Kohberger had been watching and following the girls' accounts on TikTok, that would come up, and there's a link. He's watching the girls. He's spying on the girls. He's getting layouts of their house from watching TikTok. That shit's not in the prosecution's argument. There's no argument with that. They might say that he had TikTok, and now they're going to speculate, well, he was smart enough not to follow they didn't say this, but this is what they're implying. He's smart enough not to follow the girls on TikTok, but he's somehow watching their videos on TikTok, casing the house through TikTok. None of that is the prosecution's argument. That's purely Dateline, and it's asinine, because the prosecution has stated there's no connection between Kohberger and the girls. So you should already see what this whole piece is about. It is all about creepy language, how to make it sound creepy, how to make it sound mysterious, bringing in a profiler saying this is how creepy men who can't have women think, and how it drives them nuts, and they've got to have revenge because that woman won't give him what he needs because he can't have women, while he's collecting their phone numbers. All right. I'm trying to look through my notes. So then they did a reenactment of the house. And this is where it got creepy to me. So they did a reenactment. They did a 3D model on a SketchUp type of thing, a 3D model for Dateline, recreated from pictures and images of the house as we understand it, blah, 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 blah. And then they said, here's what we've assembled to the best of my knowledge. And I freaked out when I heard it, because I'm like, oh my God, none of this stuff is stuff I've heard before. But then I remembered, this is them, Dateline, saying this is what we believe happened based on what we see. Killer came in through the sliding glass door. By the way, this doesn't make sense to me. They indicate very shortly on that Xana Kernodle is in the kitchen, but the killer comes through the kitchen. Apparently, according to their theory, Xana's not in the kitchen yet. The killer comes through the sliding glass door on the second floor in the back of the house, goes immediately up the stairs to his target. He's coming there to rape and kill Maddie Mogen, apparently, because it's a sexual fantasy. And so he's going up there to kill Maddie Mogen. Then somehow, and this is what they tell you. And at first I was like, oh my God, I didn't know this. But then I'm like, wait a minute. They're not saying they know for definitive, although they hinted. This comes from insider information and very good authority, but they don't tell you exactly where. So the killer goes upstairs to attack Maddie Mogen. Kaylee surprises the killer. She's not supposed to be there. A fight ensues, they imply, and it was a very noisy event. That's what Dateline says. It was a very noisy event. But what does that mean? Thumping, banging, screams, whatever it was very noisy. Now factor in, if that's the case, you've got Dylan Mortensen downstairs who doesn't seem to react like somebody who hears a very noisy murder scene going on upstairs. But according to them, Xana Kernodle, who's in the kitchen, goes up the stairs to investigate the loud attack happening on the top floor. Holy shit! When does this ever come in? The killer sees Xana Kernodle and gives chase. Stops killing Maddie and Kaylee and takes off, chasing Xana Kernodle down the stairs. Dylan Mortensen has to hear Xana screaming as she's being chased by a killer, I'm imagining, down the stairs. She's running, they said, back to Ethan Chapman for protection from her boyfriend, who, by the way, they say is passed out drunk in bed. Which one is it? Is Ethan Chapman awake and able to protect her, or is he passed out drunk in the bed? Killer chases Xana to her room in the pursuit of the unexpected Xana Kernodle interrupting his murder scene. He drops the knife sheath. Okay? Attacks Xana in her room, who they admit, and I've mentioned it multiple times that the family of Xana Kernodle has said this, that the coroner reported Xana put up one hell of a fight. She fought back. This is where it gets fucking bizarre for me, pardon my French. Ethan Chapin, they said, was passed out drunk in the bed, and the killer took him out with one vicious stroke. That was it. Bam. Ethan's dead. And then, they say, Ethan's legs were then carved up. And they made it clear to say it again. I repeat, carved. His legs were carved up. What the this has never, in my opinion, this has never been said before. Furthermore, it has been stated multiple times by the Gonzalez that Kaylee Gonzalez had gaping wounds. Gaping wounds. She was carved up. The father indicated she had wounds that were unlike any of the other victims. Points of origins of those injuries on Kaylee, unlike any of the other victims. They passed by what happened to Kaylee as if it was a no, never mind. The murderer came up there for Maddie, got surprised by Kaylee, and then interrupted by Xana and chased Xana down the stairs in a screaming loud fight and attacks her downstairs. All the while Dylan doesn't know what's going on and isn't sure what's happening. This takes the absurdity of what Dylan's story is to a whole new level, if that's what happened. They mentioned the timestamp at 4:17 a.m. when what sounds on an outside camera on a house nearby is heard whimpering and a thud and a dog barking. So they believe that this is the moment that Xana is attacked and killed in the room downstairs at 4:17. Remember, the car speeds away at 4:20. I want to point out again, in the video, they clarify that car is still in movement at 4:07 a.m. in the morning. When it arrives, it's still in movement. You don't see it park. They don't have video of it parking. And I don't understand this, by the way, people. This is something that stuns me. Unless the prosecution has never told us about it and the defense has never talked about it, they're looking at the front of the house on the video where the car goes by and you see it for the last moment still in motion at 4:07. You're seeing, I think, the King residence house. Why do we not? And it's a continuous, amazing quality video. Amazing quality video. By the way, you can't see the license plate if you're wondering. No, you can't see the license plate. Even with the amazing quality video that we've never seen before. New footage we've never seen before. Razor sharp image. Where'd they get that from? FBI gave them exclusive inside information. Why? Anyways, let me get back to my point. Where's the fucking video? Pardon my French. I get mad. Where's the video of Bryan Kohberger walking to the house from his car? The video is focused on the King residence. Where's the killer going to the house? There's no footage of that. So if it exists, why is it still not being shown? If it exists, why do we not see the killer going to the house and know for definitive proof whether he went into the... Why does Dateline have to say We believe he went in through the back door. Why do you have to believe it? You've got a camera on the house, don't you? You can't see where the killer went? But I don't get it. Unless I'm missing something, that wasn't the king's residence house that we're looking at. It looks like you're looking right at the king residence house. So where's the killer walking to the house? That doesn't make any sense. It leads further to my theory that if that car is involved in the murders, he dropped somebody else off, probably be behind the house, to enter the house from the outside, from the back, and then pick them up later. That would make more sense, especially if we are seeing the front of the house and you never see the killer go into the house. Somebody may have gotten dropped off at the back of the house. But you know what? That doesn't work. Why? Because they want you to believe that the person driving the car is the killer. So how did he get into the house and it didn't get picked up on camera? Why are we not talking about that? Why isn't nobody asking this question? If that's Bryan Kohberger in the car, why don't we have a video of him going into the house? Now, Steve Gonzalez hinted one time, I think, that we've got video of him going into the house. No one's seen it. But maybe it exists. I don't know. So that was stunning. Ethan being carved up was stunning. The totally ignoring Kaylee's wounds is stunning. Then listen to this stunning detail that they gave. Wow, this is a long video. I may have to break this into more than one. Listen to this stunning detail. After the killing of Xana and Ethan, and he's killed now Maddie and Kaylee upstairs, the killer is exhausted and sits down in a chair, leaving an imprint on a chair in blood in Xana's room. Holy shit! I've never heard that either. So now the killer is exhausted and sits down. And again, keep in mind, this is from the narrative of the killer went in and killed 4 people on 2 floors that are fighting back and making noise and screaming. Dylan doesn't hear any of that. Dylan doesn't know there's murders going on. The killer's exhausted and has to sit down to take a break. And somehow, by the way, has to get out, and they never cover this in the video. How does that killer get back out of the house without tracking blood outside the house? They do admit there's no DNA outside of the house of the victims. Okay? So are you just going to ignore it's impossible for that person to have killed? No, they actually did. There was one guy I've seen a lot of weird crime scenes, and I've seen one case where the crime scene was literally a bloodbath and the person didn't track any DNA out. So it's odd, but it does happen. That was their explanation. It's odd, but it does happen. That somehow he can murder 4 people. Oh, and by the way, carve someone up, which now is Ethan and not Kaylee. It's changing the whole narrative of what happened. Carves Ethan up in bed, it carves his legs up with a knife, and yet doesn't track any blood outside the house at all. But we're not, you know why we don't cover that? Because it indicates that the killer would have had to have clean up or get out of his clothes and change into something else while in the house. Perhaps while sitting down in Xana's chair inside the house, leaving a bloody print. This can't happen, in my opinion. Can't happen in the time. I know that you guilters out there are going to be like, oh yeah, that's tons of time. He's got tons of time. But they admit, or they theorize. Kohberger was exhausted at this point. People don't realize this is the other thing to point out. This is what I'm trying to, you can't have it both ways, people. Gosh, my nose itches. You can't have it both ways. They pointed out, experts, people don't realize how much adrenaline is going through your body if you're doing a murder like this. And you will be physically exhausted in a very short period of time. And yet, then they want to say, oh, he had tons of time to do this. It was easy. They were sleeping and drunk. They were fish in a barrel. So which one is it? Is he physically exhausted from chasing people around the house and murdering people and adrenaline dump and so exhausted he has to sit down and take a break for a second? Or did he sit down to change clothes? Did he sit down to get out of clothes? I don't know. They speculate about only the parts that make it look bad for Bryan Kohberger. So now we apparently know that the killer sat down and left an imprint. Was it Bryan Kohberger's DNA? Obviously not, because we don't have anything about Bryan Kohberger's DNA in the house other than that little tiny speck on the knife sheath, which they do talk about, and they talk about wow, this is such a long video. I'm going to break this into pieces. All right. Here's another thing that looked bad, in a way, for Bryan Kohberger. At 6:17 in the morning after the murders, a couple hours after the murders, Bryan Kohberger makes a phone call that lasts 35 minutes to Pennsylvania, to his house, to a phone allegedly belonging to his father. He makes 3 phone calls that morning in a short period of time, the longest one lasting 54 minutes. Now, why does that look bad? only speculation. Was Bryan Kohberger confessing to his dad, talking to his dad about something, nervous about what just happened, trying to get some advice? That makes no sense. Why does it make no sense? Because Howard Bloom will tell you it's not until his dad comes out to Pennsylvania and is driving back to him that he begins to think, oh my gosh, they're looking for a white car. My son drives a white car. That was, by the way, the most asinine thing I've ever seen. And Keith Morrison even like, yes. You know, he's like, well, they're talking about a white car. And my son oh yeah, that's what he said, indeed. They're saying, Bryan Kohberger's father is putting it together now. They're looking for a white car, and his son owns a white car. And Keith Morrison, indeed. Oh my God! How many white cars are there in fucking Pullman in Moscow, Idaho? Again, 100% asinine to suggest that, indeed, no wonder he would suspect his son. His son's got a white car, and they're looking for a white car. It's the most, again, if you guys don't see it, you guys will never see it. But that's the way they paint that. Indeed, that is suspicious. So apparently his father suspects for the first time on the drive back that his son could be involved. But yet they want to plant in your head now that Bryan Kohberger's calling his father and having these long conversations shortly after the murders. Perhaps what? What are those phone calls? Is he getting advice from his dad? Does his dad know about the murders? Or is the first time his dad starts suspecting is when they're driving back and they're like, my son's got a white car and they're looking for a white car. Maybe he's the killer. They did confirm, by the way, that the sister turned Bryan Kohberger in, that she's the one that said to their dad when he was in Pennsylvania, hey, I think Bryan Kohberger might be involved in those murders. We all knew that the sister was probably the one that did that. They confirmed it. They talk about the thumbs up photo. Good Lord, this is a long one. Hey, I am getting towards the bottom of my notes, but it's going to be a long, long video, isn't it? They talk about the thumbs up thing. And again, this is what they paint it. They paint it as, this is how they worded it. Before the murders, Bryan Kohberger was a nobody. That picture of him thumbs upping the picture is, I'm finally a somebody. I killed somebody. I'm a somebody. I'll say it again. If you don't see it, you never will. That's ridiculous jump of authority. But that's what the profiler is. This is what a killer is doing. I'm a nobody. Nobody sees me. But now, I'm somebody. Okay. Fair enough. Again, the photo in the shower looks bad. It looks bad. It's hours. It's hours after the murders, not right after the murders. He's taken a shower. He's in, looks like fresh clothes. He's got earbuds in, maybe because he's just gone for a run. Have you ever thought about that? He's a runner. They say he's a runner. Did you ever think that maybe he had just gone for a run and he came back after the run and showered? But no, the shower must be he's cleaning blood off of himself, right? That's the implication. If he's cleaning blood off himself, there would be blood all over the car. Oh no, he's a criminology student. He knows how to clean. God dang it, man. If you guys don't see it, you never will. You never will. All right. So we talk a little bit about Othram Lab and the DNA and how they did the DNA thing. Othram Lab, they indicate this is the reason why we know for a fact Othram Lab couldn't make a connection to Bryan Kohberger. The FBI had to take over and make the connection. They admit, and here's their explanation, Othram Lab was only working with publicly available databases that were very small, very small. So that's why they couldn't make a hit. It's not that they couldn't make a hit because they didn't have good data. It's because the databases they were working with were very small. Then they admit that the FBI used databases that are forbidden to be used by law enforcement. But they bring in an expert to say, let me make it clear. It's not against the law. It's just the FBI's guidelines. The FBI has guidelines that tells them not to use these big databases. In this case, the FBI chose to break their own guidelines and do it anyways, but it's not against the law. And then they even justify it. The reason the FBI decided to break their own guidelines is because they needed to the time restrictions and the high visibility of the case. They needed to break their own guidelines because this was a highly visible case and time was of the essence. So they admit the FBI had decided already that they wanted to get a conviction, and so they broke their own guidelines to make it. But they want to repeat over and over again, it wasn't illegal, so they just put that out of their head. And we're not going to talk about it at the court because really the IgG information, the genealogy information, really at the end isn't all that important. Again, let's also point out the last couple, we're getting to the end. Asinine comment. Bryan Kohberger's DNA wasn't found at the scene. Bryan Kohberger's DNA wasn't even found in the trash in Pennsylvania. When they decided, here's what they did, and they admit this in the show. The DNA evidence got them to a geographical location, not a family, not a person, but the people who would have the DNA that matches the sample in the house at the killings of King Road probably came from the East Coast somewhere, and that's how they did this. The DNA sample let them know its general geographical area where most likely there would be somebody on the East Coast, which allowed them to go look now in the Poconos and in Pennsylvania, getting close to Kohberger's house. That was what they used to why now we can get a warrant to search his trash, because we know that he's a suspect, and we know that the DNA might come from somewhere on the East Coast area geographically. So let's look further. Let's get a warrant for the trash. What they get out of the trash isn't Bryan Kohberger's DNA. No. Bryan Kohberger's supposedly cleaning his car. They don't get Bryan Kohberger's DNA. They get Bryan Kohberger's father's DNA. And then they conclude that the father is a high statistical match to be probably the father of the DNA in Pullman. If you don't get this, if you don't see it, you never will. It wasn't Bryan Kohberger's DNA. It was his dad's DNA. It wasn't any of the victim's DNA, which they're trying to suggest that he's cleaning the car to get the victim's blood. None of the victim's blood's DNA is in that trash. It's his father's DNA. Not even Bryan Kohberger's DNA. His father's DNA, which they list as a high probable match to being the biological father of whoever left the DNA at the crime scene. And only then, after they get buccal swabs and all the other stuff, do they say they got a perfect match of Bryan Kohberger at the DNA. But they don't go into that at all. The probable cause affidavit with the warrant was off of sketchy shit of geographically it might be somewhere on the East Coast, and then his father might be a high statistical match, and now good enough. Bryan Kohberger's the guy. And we're almost done. Then the part that looks again perhaps the worst. I've seen thumbnails of other content. I've not watched Harsh Reality, who I watch a lot. I haven't watched Brett J. Embry. I'm looking forward to seeing what their takes are, but I wanted to do my initial reaction video before seeing their takes. But I did see Harsh Realities pointing out this looks a little bad for Kohberger, and he had specifically the pictures of Bryan Kohberger in a hoodie that he's taking of himself in a hoodie, in a black hoodie that looks a little creepy and a little dark and looks just like a shot of Ted Bundy, which supposedly Bryan Kohberger was just watching a YouTube video on Ted Bundy in which he had a hoodie pulled over, and then here's Kohberger taking a picture of himself with the hoodie pulled over, kind of looking like Ted Bundy in the picture that was in the movie he just watched, or the documentary he just watched, and therefore it kind of looks bad. Yes, Bryan Kohberger has some photos that make him look a little creepy. I will point out he has autism spectrum disorder, allegedly. He does weird shit. He's also into criminology, so he would be into serial killers. It may be true, people. It may be true Bryan Kohberger is involved in this crime. But I still maintain it's likely Bryan Kohberger never got out of the car. He dropped somebody off maybe at the back of the house. They are the killer, or killers, plural, because again, an expert has come out and said that this was done by multiple assailants at the same time on 2 floors with multiple weapons. That was an expert testimony for the defense. It was a guy who wrote 20 books on criminology, and he says this was, in my opinion, done by multiple assailants with multiple weapons. So I don't know that Bryan Kohberger ever got out of the car if he was involved. Was he involved? Maybe. And maybe that also explains some of the creepy photos and stuff like that. Maybe. But I want to end with this thought. At the Devil's Advocates, we believe in the presumption of innocence until proven guilty. Circumstantial evidence is just that. It's circumstantial evidence. And when you've got high-profile people like Keith Morrison going on there and saying, indeed, he was going up the hill. It sounds creepy. It's meant to sound creepy. It's meant to prejudice you. Over and over again, Bryan Kohberger, his phone hit off the cell tower 23 times prior to the murders. Was he casing the place? We don't know. Did he stop at the house and monitor the house? We don't know. But we're sure going to speculate about it all day long and tell you, well, that's exactly what a killer would do, is they would go around the scene multiple times, casing it ahead of time. This is the profiler that comes on. This is what he would do. And then they would add, do we know he did that? We don't know, but we're going to speculate about it all fucking day long. So there you go. There's my initial take if you wanted it. There's your initial take if you didn't want it. If you made it this far, thank you so much for listening. It'll probably end up being 2 videos. I don't know how long this is, but if this is a 2-hour video, it's certainly going to be 2 1-hour videos. But I don't know. Maybe I've only gone an hour and it felt like 2 hours. Hope that you have a good one. Whether I do more follow-ups on this or not, I'm not sure, but I wanted to get my hot take, my initial take of it. Again, Bryan Kohberger may indeed be guilty. May indeed. And if he does, I don't want him to walk. I don't want Bryan Kohberger to walk. I'm not rooting for killers. I'm not rooting for somebody to get away with something horrendous. But my gut tells me if Bryan Kohberger is involved, which I think he may be, he's not the primary killer. He's not the only killer. There were multiple assailants. Maddie was not the target of the house, in my opinion. Kaylee was, in my opinion. And they're now trying to change the timeline over and over and over again. And it shows shenanigans. It shows that the FBI is trying to paint a narrative and tell you what happened before his first day in trial. And it's disgusting, in my opinion. So there you have it.